Steve, are you ready to start your presentation?
Yes, I'm ready. I think I'm ready.
Okay.
You may have to guide me on getting the PowerPoint actually up and operating. I've got it up, but to share the screen and what everyone has to do.
Right, you'll need to share. I didn't introduce you. If you'd like to introduce yourself, I'd like to have everybody turn their audio and their video off, and I'll turn it over to Steve Jett. He'll be talking on Canyon de Chelly, the Massacre panel, talking about the Spanish Massacre panel. So if everybody at this time will turn off their video and their audio, I'll turn it over to Steve.
All right, well, thanks very much. I'll introduce myself by indicating that for almost my entire career, I taught at the University of California, Davis in the geography department there as a cultural geographer, which means sort of like an anthropologist, but who is interested in spatial and landscape aspects. And my two main interests are Navajo culture and history, and transoceanic contacts before the time of Columbus across the oceans. So this is my, I guess, cowboy hat persona on the southwestern native scene, particularly on the Navajo reservation, but other areas as well. Of course, I've been in your area numbers of times,
right?
Including with John Ruskamp, which is always a pleasure.
Well, if you'll go ahead and start sharing your screen and bring your PowerPoint up.
Okay, I'm not going to actually want it on for a few minutes, so I'll wait on that if you don't mind.
Okay.
My special area is Canyon de Chelly in northeastern Arizona, and I spent many a moon there with friends and my Navajo informants, particularly Chauncey Naboya, who is he was the interpreter for Earl Morris when Earl Morris and Ann Axtell Morris were working in Canyon de Chelly and Canyon del Muerto way back in the 30s. And so he went around with them in those days, and he was a crewman as well on the archaeological digs that Morrises were undertaking, some of them for the Park Service. The National Monument was created in 1931. And so Chauncey was probably the most knowledgeable guy available. And he proved to be a great informant. And working with him and with some others, I ultimately published this book here, which is not on the bestseller list. It's called Navajo Place Names and Trails of the Canyon de Chelly System, Arizona. It's published by Peter Lang, which is a Swiss publisher, but has a New York office. And I've never seen a published review of the book. I had a dispute with him on the title page. It didn't list all the co-authors and so forth. Anyway, I don't think they did much in trying to promote it, but I'm trying to promote it now. So anyhow, in the process, I spent, I don't know, a couple of decades, I guess, working on this book. And in the process, hiked the lengths of both Canyon de Chelly and Canyon del Muerto and Black Rock Canyon, which is a tributary, and much of Monument Canyon. And I identified, well, I don't remember how many now, but about maybe 75 trails, canyon rim to canyon floor trails. And I collected place names for everything I could find a name for amongst the Navajo informants that I was working with. And that's what that book is largely about. So in the process, I got pretty darn familiar with the canyon system. And I picked up a lot of information that had to do not just with, the places and trails, but also with history and culture and things of that sort. As you probably are aware, Canyon de Chelly system has one of the greatest collections of rock art in the Southwest. Campbell Grant has been the primary person who has published on that. He did a book some years ago. And so we'll be talking about, particularly about one certain panel, a unique panel, a petrographic panel, a pictographic panel, in which the figures are not life-size, but the horses with riders and so forth are about my height, 5 or 6 feet high. You know, there are very few other petrographs in the Southwest, or most places, that are of that size, and which tell a narrative. At least we believe it's a narrative. It's, you know, nobody has had the chance of interviewing the long dead artist. We don't even know who he was, although there's been some speculation that he might have been a guy named Depicted, which means little sheep, who did the antelope pictographs at Antelope House in Canyon del Muerto. But we don't really know. And it's partly speculation that this depiction is of the famous Massacre Cave incident. But I thought I'd start out by giving a little background on Massacre Cave. Massacre Cave is on the north wall of Canyon del Muerto. It's just around the bend upstream on the opposite side from Mummy Cave, if you might be familiar with that ruin, that cliff dwelling. It's the biggest one in the canyons. And it's a shallow rock shelter high up just above the base of the cliff at the top of a long, steep talus slope. And the rockfall has resulted in a line of big boulders along the front lip of that rock shelter. That screens the shelter behind it from view. And so it was a perfect hiding place, or at least it seemed to be. And so when the Utes would raid, as they did from time to time coming down from Colorado, they try to particularly capture Navajo women so that they could take them back to weave blankets for the Ute captors. So the Navajos in those occasions would hide in this cave, and there are many other hiding places in the canyons, but this was one up there in the Del Muerto. So when the Spaniards came into New Mexico at the end of the 1500s and established Santa Fe around 1600 or so, and settled the Rio Grande Valley, they came into conflict with the Navajos particularly, and other tribes as well. But the Navajos and the Spaniards developed sort of a mutual raiding and trading relationship. They did slave raiding, among other kinds of and livestock raising. And so one group would, go in and steal stuff from the Spaniards, and the Spaniards in turn would steal stuff from the Navajos, or would go out and try to punish the Navajos for the last raid. Of course, they didn't know which Navajos had been involved, so any Navajo would do. And in January of 1805, that's a cold time of the year up there high on the plateau, the Santa Fe government sent out a punitive expedition out to the Navajo country. And it was probably not a very big one. It consisted both of Spanish troops from Mexico, local Spanish, probably irregular troops from New Mexico, plus Opata Indians from I think it's Chihuahua, where they come from, or Sonora. They're a Uto-Aztecan speaking group on the Mexican side. And this outfit came across from Santa Fe. It probably went south of the end of the south end of the Chusca Mountains and on up past what today is Window Rock and Fort Defiance and wheat fields, and up to nearly to today's Tsaili, Arizona. And then they west westward till they hit Canyon del Muerto. and came down a trail into the canyon following Navajo tracks. And they entered upper Canyon del Muerto that way. And they followed these tracks down the canyon, down Del Muerto, until they lost them. Now, where they lost them happened to be where these Indians that had preceded them had gone up the talus to the what they called hiding cave, today's Massacre Cave, and they hid behind that line of boulders, and you can hardly tell there's anything up there from the floor of the canyon. So they thought they were probably pretty safe, and the Spaniards just marched right by without noticing. And then some old lady who was one of the Navajos up in the cave, who had apparently been a captive at one point because she could speak Spanish, and she thought that they were impregnable up there, and so she couldn't resist shouting down at the troops, "There go the men without eyes!" And of course, that gave away the fact that there were people hiding up there, and the Spaniards started then climbing up the talus. It's quite steep, and it had little just rock-built bulwarks here and there where warriors could hide behind. But it happened that there weren't any warriors to speak of present at this occasion, because most of the younger men had gone off on either a hunting or a raiding trip of their own. And so it was old men, women, and children, pretty much exclusively. But nevertheless, they had enough arrows and rocks that they rained down on these troops trying to climb up this talus, that they kept them at bay, and the Spaniards really couldn't make any headway up there. So the Spanish group had just before this had come past the mouth of a canyon called Middle Trail Canyon, and there's a trail up that canyon that takes you up to the rim. And so Lieutenant Antonio Narbona, who was the commander of this group, sent a detachment up that trail to the rim, and those troops went along the rim, Canyon del Muerto rim, to a place where there was a projection point, small point coming out, where they could see down into this cave. They could see the floor of the cave behind the rocks. They could see the people hiding there, only they weren't hidden from up above. And so this detachment began shooting their muskets and killing Navajos in the shelter there. And the people tried to hide under the rocks, but the Spaniards shot their muskets so that the musket balls would ricochet off the back wall of the cave and bounce into the people hiding under the rocks. And that diversion, of course, allowed the people on the talus, the soldiers on the talus, to continue on up and finish off the job. As they were getting up to the cave, one Spanish, or maybe a Opata soldier or whatever, wielding a knife, was jumped on by a young Navajo woman, and they both fell down the cliff to their deaths. The soldiers that came up the talus shot or clubbed everybody else they could find in the cave to death. Only one or maybe two people survived that. Navajos survived that. One was a girl who managed to hide under one of the rocks and wasn't seen. And the other seems to have been an old man who, as many of these Navajos did to avoid capture, just leaped off Masada-like, you might say, to their deaths. But this one guy fell on somebody else's body, and his fall was cushioned, and he survived, according to one tradition. There's several different stories. I've tried to put together various versions, but there's some differences among the versions. So they killed all the Navajos except those two, the Spaniards did. And then to prove what a great military success they'd had, they cut off the ears from the corpses and put them in a bag to take back to Santa Fe to show as evidence of what they'd accomplished. So ever since, this cave has been off limits to Navajos. You know, traditional Navajos are very much afraid of ghosts, and they leave this place strictly alone. When I was there doing my work, probably in the 70s, I managed to climb up with permission of my Navajo guide. Don't try it, by the way. I managed to climb up to Massacre Cave, and I'm going to start my my screen sharing now. If I can. Okay, here's the title page. This is looking down Canyon del Muerto from Mummy Cave. That's another place you're not allowed to go into. I had special setup in those days, and in those days they didn't enforce a lot of rules anyway. But that's Canyon del Muerto. Okay. I'm not sure. Okay. Here's
you need to go full screen. Start the video, the presentation with an F5.
Oh, okay. F5. It doesn't like that. Do I do anything else besides F5?
No, that should do it. Are you on a laptop?
No, desktop. Anyway.
You can just go up to where it says slideshow on the top.
Yes. Uh-huh.
And click on that.
Yeah.
And then you just choose play from start or play from current slide.
I don't see such a.
It's just below home on the left.
Oh, yes. Play from start.
Yeah, try that. There you go.
Okay. Let's see if that works. Yeah, that works. Yeah. Okay. So anyway, this is what Massacre Cave floor looked like when I went up there. You can see the boulders on the right. You can see some of the bones that are still left there. Over the years, various people have illicitly carried off all the skulls. So there are not all that many bones left today, but well, I can't talk about today anyway. This was, back in the 70s, but that's how it looked at that time. So that's the story of Massacre Cave and the Narbona Expedition of 1803. Now there are historical question marks of various kinds about aspects of all of this. I won't try to get into the footnotes, but we are going to move next to what the advertised topic for this talk is, and that is the Spanish Expedition Mural. And it's, at least in popular thought, associated with this 1805 expedition. There's no real proof of that. There were many Spanish expeditions in here, and nobody is quite sure whether this is the 1805 one or some other one. But I'll talk about various aspects of it as we go along. You can't see the canyon floor here because it's the ledge up here. Can you see my cursor? No? Anyway, okay. Now, this whole thing is called the Spanish Expedition Panel, but not all of it is actually a Spanish expedition. And we're not sure positively whether they're 3 or 4 or maybe more figures that are all one narrative relating to an expedition. But it ranges from, well, as you can see on the right, all the way leftward on up here to off the screen, and I'll show you another one that shows what's up there. The ledge here is about 50 feet above the floor of the canyon. I was here in must have been sometime in the 70s, and oh, okay. Somehow I didn't mean to, but I got to the next one. You can see there are more pictographs up in here on the upper left. Now, I've seen many photographs and drawings of this panel, but they've all been from the viewpoint of the canyon floor. I've never run into or heard of anybody who ever went up here onto the ledge and photographed them up close. Well, when I was young and foolish, I decided I was going to be that guy. So I climbed up the ledge. Again, I was with my Navajo guide, and I was being supervised and all of that. It wasn't just going out there and being a renegade. But I went up there, and it wasn't that hard. It would be for me today, but in those days, no. And so I got up to the ledge, and so most of the rest, well, all of the rest of the pictures are going to be of these pictographic paintings taken from up on the ledge. So take particular note of these figures in here. Do you see my cursor?
Yes, we do.
Yeah, those three, and maybe this one too. And these, I'm not sure whether these are related. They may be, or they may be, maybe not. They may be copies of these. But it's clear, when you get up there, it's clear that they're different styles of pictographs. They're of different ages. And they're not necessarily all related in one single panel narrating a particular single story. So that has confused a lot of people over the years. These are those two left-hand horses I showed a moment ago. I think these are not identical in style to the main one, so they may be a little later in time, but they're similar in that you've got a human figure that's presumably wearing a cape or a robe of some sort that forms, in the picture, forms a triangle. There are the feet coming down here and the stirrups. Wait a minute, I didn't mean to do that. You've got, the head is hidden by this hat. The hat is a brimmed hat with a high crown, but as you can see on this one especially, the crown expands as you go upward. It tapers. It doesn't taper down, it tapers out, if you will. And you can see just vaguely here, and it's not very clear, this appears to be a queue, a little pigtail, and then he's carrying a weapon. This other guy is similar, except that the color of his robe is different. Now these two figures, the two larger figures, are part of the true Spanish Expedition Mural of the larger pictograph panel. And these horses are better executed than those last ones. There's a little more detail on these. Look how well this musket has been depicted here, for example. You can see the queue, the little pigtail there. See the pigtail on this one? Nobody ever noticed those before. And it occurred to me that although back in the 30s, the local Navajo informants had given the impression that this panel had been executed back, 100 years earlier than the Massacre Cave incident, they said 3 old men's lifetimes. I thought it might be useful to try to test the possible age of this thing by comparing their costumes and their firearms with ones that were extant at various periods of time in the 18th and 19th centuries. And so I did that. It wasn't an exact science, but it seemed to me that these could have been no earlier than the last part of the 18th century and could be over a long period of time in the earlier 19th century. So that would fit in the time frame with the Massacre Cave incident. Here's a somewhat water eroded one that may relate to those other ones or may not. Again, you see a firearm held. It's not as clear as the other ones. Here's another guy riding a horse. I think this is a little bit later in time. You can see I think you can see the horse, but it's faded, but it's kind of reddish color. Here's the head, ears, tail. Here's again the triangular robe, that same kind of hat. And this guy's holding a lance rather than a musket. These are just other ones that are not of great consequence here. Here's showing them a little more in relation to each other from the legs there, the ones that we've been talking about so far. Now, this left-hand one, is unique in that the figure, who has also a robe and a hat and a musket, he has a cross on his robe. And so he's always been interpreted as being a priest, a Catholic priest, because of that cross. Wait a minute. My cursor has frozen up. So okay, there it is. All right, so as I say, he's always been interpreted as being a priest. But you know, what's a priest doing on a punitive military expedition? It's not impossible. You know, bigger outfits did take priests along, but you know, it doesn't seem all that plausible. So it occurred to me that this might be something else, and I came across something that somebody else named Woodard had written some years back, and he thought that this could be not a priest, but that the cross could be the emblem of the military order of Santiago, which was originally set up to protect the a knighthood was given to the members, and they protected the pilgrimage route to Santiago de Compostela in Spain, a pilgrimage site. But the military order that was created came to be used more broadly. And I haven't researched it particularly to see if it was specifically used on the New Mexican frontier, but it could be possibly that that's what the cross represents rather than a priest. The problem with that is that, and especially because he's carrying a musket, you know, do priests even on a military expedition carry muskets? I wouldn't think so, but again, it's not impossible. But unfortunately for this hypothesis, the Santiago people, the knights, had white robes and the cross was red, not white. And it was more elaborate than just a simple thing. But you have to keep in mind, here's a Navajo interpreting what he saw and might not get it literally right, you know, in memory. So that's an unanswered question, but I think it's an interesting one. And just again shows that things aren't always as simple and straightforward as they might seem. We may have encountered that in our own lives. Here's another view of the part of the panel. Notice that this horse has a cross on its leg as well. And this is an equal arm cross. And you'll see this animal down here has a cross in its neck. What does that mean? Is that a brand? Now this is clearly the Spaniard's horse. This is not so obviously, and I'll get to this later. Is it a brand or what? To the Navajos, an equal arm cross like that symbolizes a star, for whatever that's worth. Notice these. I don't. Well, what happened there? How do I get back to full screen?
It's still full screen for us.
Okay, well, it went off it for a minute there. Anyway, notice all of these smaller animals in and around the priest or knight of Santiago, because we'll be coming back to them in a second. Here's a close-up of that figure. Now, I don't see that this one has a Q. So that might or might not mean something as far as whether he's a soldier or an Opata Indian or a priest or what. Again, you can see these quadrupeds here. And notice, if you look closely, let me give a little background to these figures, because in 1980, some years after I had taken these photographs, and I never published these photographs. I published one or two in some other works, but I never published really systematically on them at all. But in 1980, a woman in Colorado, Agnes Dix, who's an artist and an educational director at the local museum in, I think it was in Longmont. Anyway, she wrote an article for Kiva, which is, as you probably know, the Arizona Archaeological and Historical Society magazine. And she, her theory was that these critters, much smaller, as you can see, than the horses in the mural, were dogs, that they were canines, that they were war dogs specifically. You know, back in the old days, in some areas, in Mexico included, we don't know for sure in New Mexico or Arizona, troops did supplement their firearms and their lances and so forth with attack dogs. And they were often very terrifying to the enemy. And so she decided these were probably attack dogs accompanying these soldiers in the Spanish Expedition Mural. Well, getting up there on the ledge and taking these photographs, in fact, you could probably deduce this to some extent just for the canyon floor if you use binoculars. But I determined that these smaller figures were done in different kinds of paint than were the original horses and riders, that there was superposition. You can see it on the tail of this animal going across the leg of this horse, and same here. And there are other superpositions too on the older ones whose paint quality is quite different from these. And these are clearly, they're much less weathered. And so they were clearly done by somebody else with different paints at a subsequent time, a long subsequent time from when these original horses and riders were executed. And if you look at this one carefully, you see several things. A pair of feathers coming out of his head, not a hat. The Agnes Dix thought this was some kind of a baton to manage the dogs with. I see and that this guy was walking alongside this greyhound. She thought this was a greyhound, even though it doesn't have a curled up tail. It doesn't have a tucked in tummy. It doesn't have a, you can't see probably, but it doesn't have a pointed snout either. And it has erect ears rather than flattish ears as a greyhound does. So it's clearly, to me anyway, not a greyhound. And this fellow is not a pedestrian walking alongside the dogs as she thought, but is instead riding this animal. This is a horse. His legs are hanging down here. He's also carrying a round shield, which was what the Indians of the region used, not the soldiers, Spanish soldiers. So I think this is an entirely separate narrative, if you will, involving not smaller animals, but just smaller depictions because there wasn't enough space left with these larger ones. And it has nothing to do with this, this narrative of the horses and riders. And what I think it might be is a depiction of a Ute coming down from Colorado, raiding the Navajos and stealing a bunch of Navajo horses. Now, I don't know if you have the little images of us or our names on the right hand that's covering up the head of this what I think is a horse here. But if you don't, you can see also that there is a pair of reins on this animal, which sort of clinches that this is a ridden horse and not a walking man with his greyhound. This is just some repetition. Here you can see it's not that visible in this picture. I think these are reins here, these two slight lines. There's another one that has a more clear set of reins. If we come across it. Well, here's another one in the same paints. And you can see the reins quite clearly here. So that seems even clearer than the other one as being a ridden horse. This shows it even closer up. You see these reins. Every time I click on that, it moves it forward. I don't mean to do that. And these horses too, they're all patterned like this, unlike the ones in the Spanish Expedition Mural. So I think it's totally unrelated to the mural and that story. Okay, that covers most of that. I want to point out a few other things before we come to the end. These two here, what do you think those are? You're muted, so you won't tell me, I guess, but I'll tell you what they are. These are what are called shield figures. These round things are shields. Radiating out from that shield are feathers. Now the Utes, among others, had feathered shields like that. Here are the legs of the shield bearer. You don't see the head of the man, but you see the legs. Now, this may be just because the head is hidden, or it may be that these are shield figures in the literal sense, that these are living, walking shields, mythological ones. Here's a set of pictographs that seems to have nothing at all to do with the other ones. I don't know what it is depicting. Here's this figure here with some kind of a headdress, and this long thing coming out. And then these, looks like two guys riding one horse. This may be the pommel of the saddle here. But nobody's offered an interpretation of this. Last one, 50 mythical silver dollars for whoever that I didn't tell earlier in the day what this is. This is a Navajo depiction of the sun. How do I know that? Two reasons. when the Navajos depict the sun, they depict it in a blue color. Now this is a bluish gray, but in Navajo language, gray is classed as being part of blue. So it's, for as far as the Navajo is concerned, that's a legitimate color for the sun, for the blue sun. The sun is always also shown wearing horns. And here are the two horns. So those are some of the questions, some of the tentative answers, some of the still mysterious aspects of this site. It's an absolutely unique site. I don't know of anything comparable to it, in that the figures are so large, in that there seem to be maybe 2 or 3 or more narratives on this. You don't usually see real narratives in rock art in the Southwest. So that's the presentation. And if anybody wants to unmute and ask questions, I'm ready to field them.
Hi, this is Ellie Large.
Mm-hmm.
And I noticed in several cases there were some very faint, almost invisible horses in different places.
Yeah.
And I wondered if you'd ever tried de-stretch, because it usually brings out a lot of details you can't normally see.
Well, as Richard will tell you, I'm at the Paleolithic level of technology, and I've never heard of de-stretch.
Yes.
So no, I have not.
Are you still sharing your screen?
I haven't changed anything, but
okay.
You are screen sharing, it says. Yeah, you want to go back?
Yeah, you stop screen sharing.
It says you are screen sharing on this.
Right.
But you don't see my pictures. Here we go.
Yeah, there we go.
Okay, shall I back up until we...
No. No, go down to, or up to the top of the screen, and it'll say stop screen sharing. I should be able to turn yours off, but I'm not seeing it.
Yeah, I don't see.
It should be on the mine. It's on the bottom.
Well, to
hide slide.
Up at the very top of your screen, there should be a little red button that says stops.
Yes.
Share screen or
stop
change.
share. All right.
There you
okay.
Go.
Mm-hmm.
There you go.
So
well, that was very interesting. I sure enjoyed it. I don't know that I have too many questions to add to it. Does anybody else?
I've got a question.
Go ahead.
I was just wondering if anybody has ever done any carbon testing on any of those pigments.
I've never heard of anybody being up there, much less testing anything.
Okay.
Of course, the artists were up there. I figured if they did that panel and they got up there, I could get up there. But as I say, I've never heard of anybody else even drawing it. So
okay, you have slides of those pictures, right?
Yes.
You don't have a digital. Well, they didn't have digital cameras in those days. It would take a digital camera to be able to use de-stretch. And that is a computer program that will bring out detail in the pigments of the paint.
I see.
You can convert slides.
Well, I did have these digitized, but so these are digital images on the screen now.
I don't believe that the original film captured all of the wavelengths of the different pigments. It takes a digital camera to do that.
Well, someone else could go back and do that.
Yes.
Yeah, if they dare go up that ledge.
Well, I'll have to go up and look at it. It might be a possibility.
That's what drove.
Public is not allowed up there, but you might be able to get a special permission if you are willing to go through the paperwork.
Right.
Hey, that's what drones are for, aren't they?
Ah, there you go. Speaking of technology.
The drones don't usually work inside canyons.
Yeah, you
There's
might have
there's too much interference in a canyon.
Oh, well,
If
even if you're in the canyon?
The drone, yeah, if the drone can't fly through the canyon because it loses its connections.
No, but I mean, if you're right there with your control.
I would think that, yeah, if you're within 50 to 100 feet of it, it should be able to do it.
As long until as it gets shot down.
Yeah, as long as there's probably not
I did, by the way, while you fellows, everyone was talking, I went ahead and I did a copy of the screen there, Steve, of one of yours with the horses in red, and I ran a D-stretch on it. And it brings out a lot more. Of course, D-stretch goes through a whole program of 20 some plus different color variations. Some are better than others, but yes, running D-stretch on all your slides may help a little bit. It does work.
I'll leave that to others. Well, I did get requested to send copies of all of these. That's why I had them digitized in the first place, to some outfit that's archiving rock art, and I can't now remember the name of it. It's somewhere in the Rocky Mountain region.
Well, if you have a few, I would like to see some of them.
What are you seeing on my screen now?
You're going through the different D-stretch logarithms.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to look at.
Are you doing this in real time?
This is real time.
Okay.
I'm running that's the photo I captured, Steve. There you can see.
See the
horse disappears there.
If you're able to find the one that we were arguing about whether it's a ute rider or a dog master, we might be able to see more on that.
Yeah, no, I just captured that one picture when it was up there on the screen to just see what we get. But yeah, I can get that maybe from you, Richard.
Well, I don't. What did you send me already?
When you post this online,
yes,
the recording, we could then grab the frame.
Very possibly.
I sent the whole slideshow as a separate entity to you, Richard. So.
Okay, yeah, I haven't had time to download it and look at it.
Yeah, well, I mean, you could forward that to John.
That would be the better place to pick the pictures out of.
Yeah, that's a thing for you to work on there, Richard.
Yeah, give us more to do.
Might help.
We'll have another lecture.
Very interesting.
Well, we've had quite a few people on here. Does anybody else have something to add to the talk or ask a question?
I was just going to tell Stephen, it rang a bell with me when he was talking about that he was a lot younger and climbed up there. When I was working with Bob Mark and Evelyn Billow, and we were recording petroglyphs and pictographs and rock art there. I was in my 30s. I won't say how old I am now, but when I was in my 30s, we actually had to climb on our stomachs with our backpack, with our paperwork in our backpack, and climb it on our stomachs up on those inclines to get into the caves.
Where was that again?
At Canyon de Chelly.
Oh, at Canyon de Chelly.
Which cave? Mummy Cave?
We were in a lot of them, and I don't know if it was Mummy Cave or not. We were trying to get so much work done in the amount of time we were there. But it was dangerous. I mean, we had, we weren't forced to do it, but we actually crawled on our stomachs with our backpack on an incline, a steep incline, to get inside the caves. And
Yeah,
like
there's some
like you said,
challenging ones.
like you said, I wouldn't try it today.
Oh, I'm past those days, I guess, myself.
Me too.
Well, I want to thank you, Steve, for joining us and giving us this interesting topic to talk about and see your pictures. And I'll let everybody say goodbye, and I'll go ahead and end the meeting if no one has anything
I did
else.
note, Richard and everyone, Steve, I did note, I pulled my copy of Canyon del Muerto by Campbell Grant, and I do notice he used at least one of your photos in there, Steve.
Yeah, he did. And then somebody else that did a children's book on the canyons used another one. And somebody, I think, in some kind of video thing did. But yeah, just two or three things used a few of those in those days.
We'll have to see if we can find copies of your book.
Yes. Well,
So where can we get that, Steve?
Well, you can probably get it on Amazon.
Okay.
Yeah.
I haven't checked, but I would imagine it's Peter Lang. They have a headquarters in New York City, so that's the publisher. And or you could buy them from me if you want to. I don't want to get too commercial here, but I have a stack of them because they sold so poorly that I had to buy back the inventory. Much of it, not all of it.
Well, you
Steve,
should contact
send
Amazon.
Hmm?
Contact Amazon and get them to sell them for you.
Yeah, well, I could do that. Yeah.
No, I think let Richard know what price, and then we can maybe get together an order and relieve your oversupply there.
Well,
Take
Johnny,
a few off your hands.
You do buy some books from some retailers. Would they be wanting to offer his books through them? I can't remember.
Well, I'll tell you what, I have this copy with me, and inside, I think that's my writing there. It says $44.95. Now, that is not the price. You guys, I'd be willing to sell you at $10 each.
Oh, wow.
Will you autograph them?
I might. That'd be another 50 cents. If I put your name in there, that's another 50 cents.
Oh, okay, okay.
That sounds like it'd be worth it.
Your book,
Yeah.
will I get all the notes that are in there too?
Yeah, all my handwritten notes. You see all of these things? Those are all typos I discovered after the book had come out. I'm not going to correct them all for you.
That does my heart well. Very good. Well, we'll have to follow up with you, really, Steve, on that. And, you know, I'd rather get it from you and take some of those extra copies off your hands, help you clean up the study there a little bit.
Maybe you could get your friend in Springerville to carry them.
Oh, they sold the place.
Oh, they did.
Yeah. Yeah,
You're talking about Roxanne?
Roxanne with the K5 Reed's Lodge. Yeah, they sold it, well, within the last year.
Oh,
So
Well, I didn't realize that, but good for her.
yeah, and they're out in the, they're off the grid now, out at just doing the ranching.
I see.
Well, that'll be
Throttling
enough for
back
her.
a little bit.
So if we wanted to order one, how would we do that?
I
You can go through either me or Ira, and we'll end up having a list of it and be
And
able
just
to get them that
That
way.
would be an idea. Just send a whole.
Right.
If there's more than one copy, to send them together to
Right.
one.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
Richard, you'll put together with Era there
Yes.
some sort of order sheet for us?
Yes.
Okay.
Very good.
Thank you, Era.
You're welcome.
Okay. Well, I guess that's
Thank you,
all.
Steve.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
thanks.
I enjoyed it.
Good presentation.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Thank you.
Very unique, very interesting. Yes, thank you.
Thanks. Well, nice to see you all, meet you all, and maybe again.
All
You
right.
bet.
We hope
How, by the way, is the fire doing?
Well, it rained today, so hopefully that put it out, but or at least
good.
part of it.
Good.
and it's supposed to rain tomorrow too.
Yeah, so let's hope and pray that
That'll be welcome.
that the evacuees can come home.
Right.
Right. Well, we didn't get the smoke today like we have been, so maybe they are getting put out.
Well, they opened the highway again, so to me that's a good indication.
Yes.
Right.
And we didn't have the high winds. So.
Right.
Ah, good.
Thank you for asking.
All right, gentlemen.
All right. Well, with that, I'll go ahead and sign off and
take care, everybody.
Thank you.
We're hoping to be out there in November, so maybe we'll see at least some of you.
Okay, we'll be looking forward to having you come.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Goodbye.